Welcome to Leaders and Legends, the podcast focused on leadership and clinical trial execution. I'm your host, Patty Leuchten, CEO of Diligent Pharma. In each episode, we'll get to know the individuals who are driving change and influencing the direction of our industry. Whether you're a seasoned executive yourself, an emerging leader, or simply passionate about clinical trials like I am, join us as we discuss our industry's most pressing challenges, the future of clinical trials, and hear insights and advice from the leaders who are moving our industry forward. Peyton, thank you so much for joining us on Leaders and Legends.
Well, thank you, Patty. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, as I said when I reached out to you, I've been a fan from afar. So I've really been looking forward to this conversation to get to know you a little bit better. And I want to cover a lot of ground. I want to hear about your role at Parexcel and how you got there. But first, I kind of want to do a little time travel and go back to early career, including your very first job, even if it was not in this industry. I'm just very curious. When did you start working? How old were you? What was your job?
Yeah, I love that question. Very first job was at age 13, waitressing. So I started working early, but I will tell you, other than that, all of my jobs have been in healthcare. So I
Oh, wow.
volunteered as a candy striper at that same age. And like a number of the other guests you've had, kind of worked all the way through. So I've always been in healthcare. I always knew that's what I wanted to do, which was just, kind of very lucky at an early age to find something you gravitated to from an industry. And then I've gotten to work obviously now in a wide range of roles across healthcare.
Yeah. And where were you working as a 13-year-old? Where did you grow up?
Yeah, I grew up in the Chicago suburbs, and had a great opportunity then to go to the University of Illinois for undergraduate. And that's where I discovered hospital administration and some of the patient access challenges. So way back in undergraduate, believe it or not, worked at a hospital at the same time while I was an undergraduate, which was a great, opportunity overall. And then went to graduate school, actually at Ohio State in health administration. So my early career was all in hospital or health administration. And that was my first exposure to clinical trials, actually. Some of my first projects were really trying to navigate the financial challenges of a large academic medical center investing in different types of research and how to juggle the different funding and support associated with that and the gaps, in reimbursement for many of the patient treatments that are part of a clinical trial. So that was my very first exposure.
Interesting.
Way back when in the late 80s, believe it or not. So, and then from that, I actually went into consulting. So I got a taste of like the big consulting, which taught me a lot, frankly, about how I didn't want to stay in a company like that, and ended up then joining a very small company as an owner, as a partner. So at a very young age, was a partner and then a founder really of my own company called the Lash Group and grew that. It was one of the first generation patient access, reimbursement, HEOR type companies. So we competed a little bit with some of the big CROs that were really just coming into their own in the late 90s. But, was a different kind of business, much more on the commercial side, REMS and expanded access programs, those types of things. Grew that company, sold that company to a large Fortune 20 company. And I will tell you, that taught me a lot about the importance of integrating companies, right? They allowed me to incubate that company a bit, grow it to about 5,000 employees. So it was able to really reach its full potential that I certainly couldn't get it to, as an independent owner previously. So that was exciting to see that journey. And then gave me a lot of just corporate exposure. So, ability to work across a wide range of roles across specialty healthcare, oncology, always with that patient access theme. But, was really able to increase my own resume and experience, but also see the realities of corporate life, Patty. So I was the only female on the executive committee. I was the only female named executive officer. There was only one woman on the board of directors. All of that has changed dramatically, right, since then.
Yes.
But, you forget 15 years ago how different the corporate boardroom was.
I want to talk about that. And there's a lot to unpack in what you just said. I'm struck by first the transition from sort of the big consulting, environment to this kind of entrepreneurial endeavor, which is very, very different. And can you talk a little bit about that? Was it were you kind of entering that new opportunity with just kind of like you were frustrated with what was going on and you wanted to kind of
It was brave.
chart a new path? Yeah, I want to
It
hear
was
about
very
that a little
brave at the
bit.
time. I was
Yeah,
lucky to be early in my career. Some ways it's early in your career, you can take bigger risks, but it felt
yeah.
like a massive risk. In fact, I was pretty newly married at the time, and my husband thought, "This is likely not gonna work," actually. So we were
Wow.
kind of prepared for that scenario. But again, earlier in your career, right? It's in some ways easier to be bold, and I was quite bold with that, creating a new type of entity and really just listening to feedback from sponsors, from pharma companies on kind of some
Mm,
unmet needs in terms of patient access to particularly the new generation of technologies, the first wave of biotech products that just weren't neatly reimbursed, had high copays, and patients couldn't navigate access to these very, very easily. These are now services that are frankly standardized, but at the
yeah.
time they were really new.
Brand
So
new, yeah, so
it was
that's really
exciting.
interesting. Yeah, and I actually didn't realize that we sort of had that common history because I left sort of a corporate,
Oh,
environment that I was very unhappy within to start my own company early in my career, and, yes, very, very similar, and it
we do.
is
We have some
yeah,
parallels.
yeah, yeah, and
It did
so
attract me to Parexel though too, right? Because I had had both that big company experience, but also that entrepreneurial experience. I knew of Parexel really my whole career, because
mhm,
again, I kind of competed on the fringes of some of the things that they did. But because Parexel was going from being a public company to a private company as part of the team that
right.
I was brought in with, it felt very entrepreneurial. It felt like that opportunity for me, like I did with my own company, right, to move really quickly with decision making, to really not have all the same level of governance that a giant public company has to have,
Yeah,
to really be able to make change quickly. And that's absolutely what the opportunity was that presented itself. So it's been
yeah.
exciting to be able to utilize my entrepreneurial roots, but in a big company,
Y y
mindset.
yeah, I'd like to talk about Parexel, because in some ways you can be in that situation almost like an intrapreneur,
Yes.
and was that the expectation when you came into Parexel that you were going to innovate and launch new things? And, um, talk about your role when you first joined Parexel.
Yeah, it's such a good question, and that was part of the mindset. So I was matched up with Jamie McDonald, who would be the CEO of Parexel, so
Yeah.
well known, with a great track record as a CEO of CRO, and Greg Rush as CFO. So the two of them had worked together, and I was kind of the new girl being added into that dynamic, if you will. But I was familiar with a number of the folks at the private equity company that owned Parexel, and they really saw the opportunity that we would bring together, to really leverage each other's strengths in really different ways. So that entrepreneurial piece was definitely, I think, part of it. The fact that I had run big businesses, scaled businesses, I was really attracted to the global nature of Parexel. I had worked outside of the US as part of my various corporate rotations and loved it. And this was the opportunity to work obviously on a very different global stage of our, 24,000 employees at Parexel. 5,000 are in the US, right? So the
Yeah.
majority of us are outside of the US. So that was exciting. And then just to be part of that next generation of clinical research organizations, right? How do we evolve, and not just for Parexel, but as a broader industry as well?
Yeah, and the CRO industry has changed so much. I spent most of my career working within CROs before starting my
Right.
own business. And back in the day, we were sort of body shops, arms and legs, and I talked about that a little bit with Steve Cutler.
Mhm.
And the industry certainly has evolved quite a bit. And so, what do you like when you think about Parexel today? Um, how is Parexel sort of driving change or making a difference
Yes.
or sort of addressing some of the current challenges with clinical trial execution?
Yeah, sure. Well, when I first joined Parexel, I was chief commercial and strategy officer. So that was one of
Oh,
my
okay.
first tasks, to really
Mhm.
look at how do we reshape this strategy. And Parexel was really well known across the large pharma companies,
Yeah.
but not as well known across biotech. So we decided one of the most important decisions I made back in 2019, so before the pandemic, was to create a Parexel biotech division and entity within and create that focus. That's now almost half of Parexel. So that's grown
Wow.
dramatically. And I think that's been really important to our success, but also for driving innovation because it brings us with those emerging entrepreneurial biotech companies that have some of the
Yes.
most exciting science. We can bring them some of our insights from working across both large pharma sponsors as well as other biotech companies. So we can bring a lot of value, but also help really drive change, right? A biotech company is more open to change because they're not as set in a certain way of working and that this is how we've always done our studies. And so I think that driving change has actually been a lot easier. And then having those proof points from biotech is something that we can bring our larger customers because of course they're going to be
Yes.
more conservative, right? And so they need to see those proof points. And,
Yeah.
in your podcast with Steve Cutler, I thought he touched on that beautifully. It is very tough for the big companies to make some of the changes that we need to see in order to really improve the speed and efficiency of clinical research.
Yeah, yeah, and it is in some ways kind of really important for big companies to be able to be a little bit more nimble and
That's right.
adopt innovation because they have such an influence
Right.
overall in the industry.
That's right.
So
Yeah. In
I
addition to biotech, I should probably just add the other big thing I saw, Patty, which I know you will love, is the opportunity to really bring the patient into the
yeah,
conversation on clinical research. I was really struck how, when I reflected on, our own journey at Parexcel, we never framed things in the voice of the patient. That purpose and connecting the purpose
right.
for every single one of our employees is what gets me out of bed in the morning, frankly. So I think that has unlocked energy internally, but it's also really resonated with our customers. So patient-guided drug development really should be table stakes. It's
Yeah,
not yet, but
right.
that's really one of the things I'm probably most passionate about. We've made a lot of progress in the almost 7 years that I've been at Parexel. We created a chief patient officer. I think we were the first to do that across all the CROs, and that really has taken on a life of its own in terms of just changing the conversation.
Yeah.
As you start a clinical trial, what that means, and really looking at the protocol from a very different perspective and making sure it's compelling for patients and for sites.
Yeah. It is one of, I think, the most interesting changes in my sort of 30 plus years that finally the patient is front and center. But as you said, we're not there yet
We're not there
as an
yet.
industry. And I love that you're connecting the dots with your employees. I'm not surprised when, you mentioned you started as a 13-year-old working in a hospital. It feels to me like that is sort of a thread
Yep.
that has continued, just in terms of, um, kind of like your leading with heart is what
Yep.
I saw on the Parexel website, and
That's right.
it feels to me that that's sort of the way you're leading the charge at Parexel in a very sort of heart centered leadership,
Yep. It is.
and
It combines, right, my life's work of access to medicine with kind of the how you do it, right? Bringing that
mhm.
passion and, the with heart piece has really resonated with our team, internally as well.
Yeah. So I've known Jamie for so long. We worked together when I had Avoca, and I would always pull him into some of our executive sessions and to talk about our research. And, um, I just wonder if you could sort of characterize the
Mhm.
shift with taking over from Jamie. I've always been so impressed with him, and he has a different sort of approach, it seems,
Mhm.
and so can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, no, it's been great. I feel really fortunate, and honestly, Jamie is a big piece of why I joined Parexel.
Yeah.
In all to be completely frank, to be able to learn under him, having worked in all these adjacent areas, but not directly for a CRO, it had
Yeah.
to be that right match. And so, absolutely, I think learning from him has been just pivotal. Pivotal. I think planned succession. It doesn't always happen, right? Oftentimes you have to go outside of a company when they're looking for a change, and I feel really fortunate, right, that we had a planned succession plan and that it worked. And that was really only possible really with Jamie's leadership, right? And his
Yeah.
support, to both give me those opportunities, but also to provide that sponsorship and guidance along the way. I would say our styles are very complementary.
Mhm.
We work so closely together that I do miss him. I get to talk to him weekly, so I am kind of lucky. He's still really right there
Oh,
as a
that's great. I was
resource.
gonna ask you if he still is somewhat involved. Yeah.
He is, he is. He's
Yeah.
still an investor, obviously, in Parexcel as well, so that kinda helps. We have aligned interests, but,
Yeah.
he's just incredibly supportive and literally there at any moment when I just wanna make sure, "Hey, this is what I'm seeing, this is what I'm thinking, what's your reaction?" And, just provides that kinda right reinforcement, but also just positive encouragement, which is something I think we all need, right, in that journey, and I will tell you for our organization, the support of having a seamless transition like this has just been incredible. I mean, I really feel like the support of the
Mhm.
organization, I think because there's so much instability in the world and across our
Yes.
customers and
Yeah.
even across our industry, that having this just feel seamless and smooth and stable has just been fantastic. And I'll tell you, Patty, as a female leader in our industry too, I also have had just both men and women reaching out that are excited to have a female CEO that is positioned for success.
Yeah.
And I think that obviously is a differentiator, right? And so
Mhm.
this is an opportunity, right, for us to hopefully write a different narrative to leadership in our industry. And we're a majority female industry.
Yeah. I just got the chills when you said that. I do wanna go back to something you said earlier in our conversation about, being the only woman on an executive team, being the only woman in a board, and I had that experience early in my career as well, just being on sales teams,
Hmm.
working at CROs when in the early days and being the only woman. And I wonder if you feel that things have really improved in a tangible and significant way over the last, say, you know, 10 to 20 years. Could you characterize sort of that
Yeah.
growth and change, or do you feel like we're kind of not quite there yet, in terms of
Yeah.
women leadership?
It's a good question. We've definitely made incredible progress, right? I certainly have seen and benefited from the progress. I do still think there's work to do. It does feel like the higher up you go, the more that you realize the work that's left to do. So I think that that's clear. And I also think, though, now there is a better recognition for the challenges to be authentic as a leader when you're the only, right, in a room. Anytime you're the
Yeah.
only, you have to conform to some extent. And I remember, especially early in my career, just feeling like I was threading a needle, like both being authentic, but what would fit in a
Yeah.
dynamic in a boardroom or with a leadership team was pretty narrow. And that's an
Yes.
additional burden, right? And so I feel like that threading that needle, like it's gotten easier to thread, it's gotten wider, but we're still threading a needle. And what I tell, other women, including the women leaders at Parexcel, is that the most powerful thing for me has been performance capital. Being able to
Mhm.
define your results, being able to constantly be able to say, this is what we're trying to achieve, here's the metric, and here's how we've achieved it, is so critically important. Because without that narrative, without you shaping your own story and your own narrative, someone will do it for you, frankly. So you really have to kind of take control of the power of the situation, which is performance capital. And the earlier that you can learn that in your career, the better. You don't have to run a giant P&L to be able to define what you've contributed and the impact that you've had on a business. Every single person in a
Yeah.
company can do that, but we often don't frame it that way. And when I'm meeting with our women leaders, that's really what I encourage them to do. And I have found that to be empowering, right? Because it
Yes.
changes how I also feel in a room. Like you feel like you've got that power, and then that confidence comes through, which is critical for all of
Yeah.
us.
Yeah. I love that performance capital, and you said something really important, about authenticity,
Yeah.
and I think in the early days of my career, and I guess it was 1987, I kind of was noticing that, there weren't that many women leaders, but
Mhm.
some of the women leaders that I, interacted with, it felt like they were trying to be something that they weren't. And
Yes,
here I am, a young, early 20s, looking up and just noticing, and I just felt like I can't be that way. I just have to be myself. But
that's right.
yet, when you're the only one around a conference table, you do have to navigate that very differently, and I really, I like the way that you described that threading of the needle, and
Yeah.
I wonder if you could talk about, just the programs that you have in place at Parexel, because in talking with some of your colleagues, um, I think I'm getting it right that you do support sort of women, leadership through
We
mentoring
do.
program, but could you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. It's probably one of the things I'm most proud of, and we love to share it, right? Because
Yeah.
none of these things should be secret, right? We should share what's working. And the feedback I'm getting consistently, including, especially now since I've become CEO, is that these programs are critically important for all leaders. So we have a Women in Leadership program that really is for high performing leaders, and it's a full year program. It includes mentoring, support, development. We're opening that program up to other cohorts. So it's almost like we've started with women, but now it creates a way to support all types of diversity and leadership, which is
Yeah.
exciting. Similar to that, we also have a program called Wisdom Circles, which are actually for more junior and middle management. And for me, what I've noticed
Interesting.
about the Wisdom Circles is it creates within our company a way for them to navigate and have relationships across different functional areas. And they each are in charge of different content each month, and they can pull in guest speakers. So they might have me come on to one of their wisdom circles and just talk for half an hour on executive presence. That's been a common one, to be honest with you,
Yeah.
any topic. And it gives me a chance to actually really meet a whole
Yeah.
bunch of leaders I might not actually get to interface with. They obviously get to interface with me, and we get to talk about a topic that relates to all of our professional development. And they've been really powerful because in both examples, these are relationships for life. And now we
Mhm.
are actually adding other cohorts to it, other types of diversity. So it's not exclusive, which is exciting, right? I mean, nothing's better than having something you create and the guys want to be part of it.
That's
And
great.
we've got really global diversity being part of it. So it's been great for us to have that. And it's inexpensive, right? It's time, right? That's the biggest thing. And you have to have people that want to give, right? Because these are extra work. And I'm a believer, you get what you give, right? I think
Yeah.
that's an Oprah Winfrey quote. And everyone that's in these programs really has to be, of that mindset overall. But they've been incredible, and we've been able to do them largely virtually. So they'll usually have one or two things in person so that you really feel
Okay.
connected. But then monthly can actually be, through a Zoom or a Teams call, which is great, right? Because it supports that flexibility and life work balance. It helps reduce travel costs. It really has made it a manageable program for us to scale, across Parexel. And, our head of diversity and inclusion, Aida Sabo, she created all these
Oh,
programs. We have
wow.
almost a decade of running some of these. And now
Wow.
we've got results, right? We actually see women across our leadership ranks, including VPs and up, where we really are proportionate, to the population, which is what you want to see, right? Everyone
Yeah.
be represented.
It sounds fantastic, and as you were talking, what occurred to me is that programs like this also help men.
They do.
We have
Yes.
plenty of, especially in my last company when we were a bigger company, we had, uh, men who were juggling their sort of, family lives with young children and their professional lives, and
Exactly.
it sort of brings all of this out into the open to talk about because it's just it's so important to be a healthy whole human being to
Exactly.
consider all of these various aspects
And that's
of our
exactly the
lives.
feedback we've gotten, Patty. That's exactly spot on, right? Is it's really made it a safe place to talk about all types of inclusion and bring your whole self to work. Moms aren't the only ones that are parents. Dads are parents too, right?
Yeah,
So it's really
yeah,
has changed that narrative, which has been exciting to see. But it
yeah.
also just creates that way of networking too, which I think especially post COVID, I'm worried about, right? How do my teams
Yeah.
really get to network? It's not going to happen at the office in the same way we are offering more hybrid work, but that means we need other ways to really get to know each other in those more
Hmm.
intimate ways.
Yeah. Yeah. When I had a conversation with Pam Tennerts from
Yes.
Medable, and we were talking about leadership sort of as a continuum, a
Yeah.
journey. It has a start, but it doesn't necessarily have sort of this finite, okay, now I'm through with my sort of learning as a leader. I was wondering if you also think of leadership in that way that it's constantly changing and evolving? And if
Definitely.
so, what are you still sort of leaning into or working on as a leader?
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with Pam. It's absolutely a journey. And I think the needs change not just with the organization you're at, but also just with the broader needs. For me and kind of my leadership journey, I'd say the common theme is that I've always been a servant-based leader. Like, how can I help, right? Being how I
Yeah.
approach every conversation, how can I clear out obstacles? And then purpose. Like I've always found purpose to be what gets me excited and that connection point, that we were talking about. But I have found now the most important feedback I get is just authenticity. I was just actually in India for a week with our colleagues. We have almost 6,000 employees in India. And the feedback I had that touched me the most was, oh, you're just so normal, right? You're so accessible. I can just talk
Yeah.
to you like a normal person. And I think
Yeah.
that's what we all want out of our leaders. I certainly
Yes.
saw that from Jamie McDonald. I think in our industry, especially post pandemic, we just don't tolerate corporate errors anymore. I mean, it's just not acceptable. And I think a lot of people have carried some of that with them, and it's not appealing, right? So if we want to retain and attract the best talent, we're going to have to be really authentic leaders that are vulnerable. I don't know everything. I never will know everything. And if I'm not vulnerable, I won't be listening to the great ideas of my colleagues, right? So it's just a very different way of leading. And I never would have thought that. Early in my career, I thought I was supposed to know all the answers to be a leader,
Yeah.
right? I mean, it's just
Yes.
really flipped for me everything on its head. I try to be the last to talk, even. So I don't bias the discussion, I don't bias the debate, and I can really take it all in and learn from it. And oftentimes, frankly, I'm wrong and others are right, and that's a
Mm.
beautiful thing.
Yeah. Yeah, and again, this isn't just a woman leadership,
No,
uh, thing.
not at
It's
all.
it's important for men to be authentic and vulnerable
Right.
as well.
Yep.
I wanna
The
go
other thing, and you'll love this because I got it from Jamie, and I didn't really realize it, but I think when we have these scientific organizations, right? I do think there's a huge benefit to energy and passion. And I remember my first day at Parexcel, that really was the charge, the call to action that Jamie gave me was to really bring that energy and passion and my energy to the
Yeah.
company. And he was right. I don't think I appreciated how critical that would be for changing culture, right? And really being able to take the company to the next level. But he was spot
Mm.
on. And, it's an area where he saw that strength in me probably more than I did, actually. Like, I
Yeah.
just thought it was me, right? Like, he saw it as
That's
differentiating and something that could really help the company move forward.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I could see how that could be such a catalyst because people want to feel connected with the work they do. They want to feel
Right.
connected with their leaders. They want to be excited about their work,
That's
and
right.
and that you have to be somewhat intentional about that with creating, a positive culture. So I love that. I want to go back for a few minutes about just sort of the state of the clinical trials industry right now in terms of where we are from a technology standpoint, from an innovation standpoint, and just wonder if you could sort of comment on some of the sort of broader industry challenges, especially through the lens of innovation.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I think we have to recognize that our number one challenge as an industry will always be talent, right? Like, I think we can get really I'm excited
True.
about artificial intelligence and machine learning,
Yeah.
but you have to have talent still to make that happen. And I think the turnover that's been normal in our industry, it's just not okay. Right. So I am really working to bend that curve, right? Because there's real value in that, right? In terms of harnessing, not just developing challenging, but having them contribute, your talent contribute to
Right.
your future. And I think that's critical because then you have people that know the company and how we need to change new ways of working in clinical research.
I agree. I think we also need to attract new talent into the
Absolutely.
industry, which concerns me a little bit, just in terms of, uh, new young professionals entering into the clinical trial space.
No, you're absolutely right. One thing we've invested in, and it is an investment, which means it's hard, is a program to really train and develop people without any clinical trial experience, kind of really
Great.
coming right out of undergrad or graduate school
Yeah,
programs. And it's like an apprenticeship program, right? And
that's
they have to,
fantastic.
it's rigorous.
Yeah, because I don't know why, but people put me in touch with young professionals who are looking to advance in their careers. And what I hear from so many of them, it's sort of a chicken and egg thing. Without
Yep.
the experience, they're not getting the opportunities. And of course, without the opportunities, they're just sort of in limbo. And so to have that kind of sort of feeder program where you're training people, I think is great.
Exactly. No, we've seen great results from it. So it's definitely an investment. I think that we're seeing the return
Yeah.
from, and it's the right thing to do also, which is critical. And I think bringing in some of that younger talent, they tend to be more open of new ways of working, on new ways of leveraging artificial intelligence and machine learning. Where I've seen folks challenge is really folks that, like me, have lots of years of experience. And so it does feel like a risk to make a change versus, the next generation can be really open to it. So we need all of us together to be able to accelerate these changes.
Yeah.
And I'm excited. I mean, I think we're at a tipping point, right? Where sponsors are also going to become more open to some of these changes, things that will really support speed of clinical trials, help us be more efficient in
Yes.
clinical research, but also to bring clinical research in greater numbers to countries that are underrepresented. And certainly India is an example of that. I can tell you our industry association, ACRO, has been very focused on looking at what are the barriers, like what's holding us back. And that representation, again, is just so critical, particularly in today's landscape where we know representation impacts the data of clinical trials.
Right.
We really need to make sure that we're addressing that in a holistic way.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes. So, when you sort of think about the future of clinical trials, say the
Yeah.
next 5 to 10 years, what, how do you think the industry is going to unfold?
Yeah, I think it's gonna be exciting. I am not scared at all about change. I've heard, a lot of consultants out there, that kinda try and project, well, clinical monitoring, will absolutely go away. I'm like, the nature of the work needs to keep evolving, right? And I
Yeah.
think if we all embrace that change, we'll actually create even better jobs and a better ways of working. So I think those are exciting. We're starting to apply, AI, ML into a wide range of use cases across the business. That's really exciting, mostly because it improves quality and speed. The
Yes.
person doesn't go
Absolutely.
away, right?
Right.
But it actually makes the work they do much more satisfying, gratifying. But anything that improves quality, as you know, it's your life's work, is
Mhm.
really where we need to be focused right now. So AI ML is super exciting. I think patient-guided drug development, where we started the conversation, is
Yeah.
another big area. That will honestly help us have trials that are more successful, particularly in startup. A lot of
Mhm.
times we're stuck, right? Because that study is just simply too much of a burden for patients, not compelling to sites. And so patient guided drug development to us really means looking at it from a protocol optimization perspective and doing that work upfront. And I think that saves money at the same time. It makes us all more efficient, in what we do. So those are some of the biggest
Yeah.
areas that we're excited about.
Those are great areas. And with, with AI and ML, I'm with you. I think that it's a misperception that it's gonna replace, our talent. If anything, it
Right.
requires even more, of our subject matter experts. Are you seeing with your clients that there is, a willingness now to embrace, uh, new tech that is leveraging AI, or is there still some reticence?
No, we're
Um,
definitely seeing that openness. Honestly, I was just
Good.
with a sponsor last week where that was the focus of our discussion, and we're sharing in detail how we're using it. And I would tell you, once they see that we're not taking any of the human talent out of it, in fact, we're amplifying that piece. We're just making them more efficient at what they do. They have that same reaction you just did, which is this is what we've all wanted, right? Things that really can help us with first time quality, that can really take out some of the burden and that busy work that still exists in clinical research. So,
Yeah.
the conversations have been good. We have a lot of work to do. Obviously, there's not a lot of guidance from regulators. So I
Not
think
yet. Right.
not
Yeah.
yet. And we're having those
Mhm.
discussions and our industry association, ACRO, and actually we're chairing that task force. Stephen Pike is chairing that for ACRO right now from Parexcel. And there's it's good that in some ways they're leaving it open, right? Because then we
Yeah.
as an industry can help shape it, right? And make sure that it's appropriate. And sometimes you have to go slow to go fast. So do it the right way,
Exactly,
and that
yes.
will allow us to go fast in the longer term by doing it the right way
Yeah,
first, by being
and
careful
then
and prudent.
right, and having, some proof points and case studies and experience will start to get that sort of,
Exactly.
wheel turning,
That's right.
yeah,
But
so,
we have real urgency. Sponsors need us to find ways to do things quicker and cheaper, right? And without compromising in any way quality and safety.
exactly. Yeah, and the interesting thing is that it actually could achieve higher quality and consistency
That's
with
right.
the use of AI and ML. So that whole, sort of, you can't have both, speed and cost effectiveness and quality.
You
Well,
can.
it provides that sort of pathway, which is super exciting.
Exactly. Definitely fits into everything you've done for our industry, Patty.
Oh, well, thank you. So I just have a few more questions. I know we're running out of time here, but um, I want to ask you if you could sort of describe the most gratifying thing about your work and also the most challenging right now.
Yeah. Oh, that's actually a hard question. I mean, for gratifying, there's so many good examples. I mean, this past year, we were part of a number of products getting FDA approved that really were game changers for patients.
Yeah.
And so there's no doubt that that's part of the most gratifying. And being able to relay those stories to our whole company is just so important because everyone's part of that journey, not just that study team. So there's a lot of pride there. I love, creating great jobs, creating a great culture, creating a place people want to work. So for me, those are all, part of like the best parts of work and why I love what
It's
I do.
awesome. Yeah.
They're also the most challenging, right? Because to be able to do that while we meet the needs of our customers is challenging, right? I
Yeah.
definitely feel more pressure than ever before. Some of those same FDA approvals were some of the hardest on our teams. We were doing things at a pace that they had never been done, right? And
Yeah.
and and on some of these trials, like, it's emotional, right? I mean,
Yes.
every day impacts, a patient's life. So, you can feel that pressure. And so I think what I've tried to do to take the good and the bad is just connect that purpose everywhere I can. Spend time with teams that are under pressure, so they know why, what they're doing and its impact. And I think that has made those hard parts of the job much more impactful when we're asking people to do something at a pace they maybe have never done before. But that's the
Yeah.
opportunity, and it's worth the prize, right? When you think about the impact for patients.
Absolutely. And it really is where the energy, the passion, the focus on culture comes into play in terms of the success and Parexcel's success. My last question really was going to be about your legacy. I feel like we've talked so much about all of the great work you're doing at Parexel and what you're bringing to not only the employees, but also your clients in the industry. But is there anything else that you would add to,
Yeah.
like, what do you want people to think of, Peyton Howell, in terms of the mark that you've made in
Yeah.
our
Well,
industry?
thank you, Patty. I'm only 6 months in the role of CEO, so it's definitely too
Well,
early to
you're
talk about my
rocking it,
legacy.
Peyton. So,
It's a little early, but you're right. I do think there's 2 things that I hope I can help contribute to this industry. I would say that first is absolutely bringing the patient voice to that center of clinical trials. You're absolutely right. That's kind of been that theme for my work, and you captured it. And then I think secondly, I do think that passion, that energy into our industry is critically important. And, sometimes, without that energy, it can feel like there's apathy, right?
right,
And showing
right.
how much we care, right, is so pivotal to the experience. When we know we're rowing together with our customers, the sponsors and biotech companies, we're rowing together, everything feels different. And
Yeah.
for me, I'm a complete believer in all the research about grit. Grit is what I look for in our employees.
Yes.
So that's passion and perseverance are the most successful leaders. That's what I strive to be. It's not the smartest person in the room, but it's the person who brings that passion and perseverance every day. And I hope that energy is some of what I can bring to our industry.
Yeah. Well, Peyton, thank you so much. Thank you for your leadership. You're such an inspiration. And thanks for taking time to talk with me today.
Thank you so much, Patty. And thanks for doing these.